Okay. Good morning. Good morning. Once again, I'm sorry that I'm late. Just took a little bit of time to log in today. And welcome back, David Zolti. Mazel tov. Mazel tov on the Simcha. You should always travel for Simchas.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. Shem, bye, everybody.
Amen. Amen. So we're in the middle of a sugya discussing if you learn things from each other when it comes to karbonas. And the last thing we learned was v'chitema Rabbi Lozar milsa mimilsa loy gomar. So the question is we should really go back to Daf Zayin of a base just to get the context. So the Gemara said, "We Omar Rabbi Lazar Hachi." Did Rabbi Lazar say? Did Rabbi Lazar say that you don't learn one thing in Kachim? You do learn from one thing from the other, because Rabbi Lazar taught us that we learn regular dam from from the Paraduma. Let me just find the Gemara inside. Rabbi Lazar is further up in the Amud. Right. Rabbi Lazar said, "Af bedam loy kidesh lechatzayin." Rabbi Lazar was the one who said that you learn regular dam from Paraduma. Well, you don't really learn it from Paraduma, but we learn that regular dam, since it also is v'tovel, the dam, we learn that you cannot be mekadosh half of the blood, meaning you have to be mekabel all the blood in one keli. The problem is, itmar chavite kohen gadol, Amar, eina kedusha l'chotzayin. You can't be mekadosh a half a isarin at a time, as each mincha is brought for the kohen gadol. Rabbi Lozer Amar metoich shekarva l'chatzayin kedusha l'chatzayin. V'balt you're makar of a half of isarin at a time. You could be makdash a half of isarin at a time. And the problem is turning on to Ardaf, Daf Chesam Aleph, Vim Isa. If you hold that dam is loy kiddush l'chatoyin, it doesn't work, then you have to be mekadosh all the dam together in the klisharis when you makabel it. Vim Isa leilaf mida. Why don't you learn the minchas chavitin from dam? Just like dam, the whole thing has to be at the same time. So too, by the minchas chavitin, they have to be makdish the holy sarin at the same time. And if you're going to tell me that Rabbi Lozer holds that you don't learn different things in Kachim one from another, and just because you do have such a halacha by dam, who said that halacha can be applied to a mincha? But Rabbi Lozer does learn one thing from the other in Kachim, because the Amar Rabbi Lozer mincha shekamta behechal kshera. If you made kimitza on a carbon mincha, which is supposed to be done in the Azara, but you did it in the Heichal, it's going to be kosher. Why? Because we learn it out of a different kachim. We find that the mlechem aponim that's kept in the Heichal has an avodah that has to be done to it. That's if we would compare the lechem aponim to a mincha, the Kemitza, which is mater, the Shirayim, would be the Bezichin of Levina that would be removed from the Shulchan to be placed on the Mizbeach. So you do find a Kemitza, or the removal of the Bezichin, which is parallel to the Kemitza, can be done in the Hechel. So from that for that reason, Rabbi Lozer himself says that since you see it by a similar scenario, by the lechem aponim, huadin it'll apply to the regular mincha as well. That a kmitza done in the heichal will be kosher. So oibazoi, you see, Rabbi Lozer does learn one type of kochim from another. So why doesn't he learn chavitin from dam that the entire isarin you have to be makdish together? Zakt Gemara, mincha mi mincha yalef. Yes, we'll learn a standard mincha from the lechem aponim because they're both variations of what a carbon mincha is. But the mincha midam lo yalef. That doesn't mean that Rabbi Lozer is going to apply any principle that he learned by dam to a mincha. Fragt the Gemara, o mincha mi mincha mi yalef. But are you asserting that Rabbi Lozer holds that you can learn one mincha from another mincha? So the standard mincha from the lechem aponim on Shabbos, mi yalef, does he actually learn that way? However, Dr. Gemara, Vatanya we learned, Ad Shaloi Perka. So now we are talking about the lechem aponim. And the Brisa says, you have lechem aponim that you have not yet taken off the old lechem aponim yet from the shulchan. You have not yet removed the levoina at the same time, because when they took off the breads from the shulchan, as we learned yesterday, the 4 kahanim, one coin would take off each marach of bread, and then there'd be 2 kahanim, one would take off each one of the 2 boziche levaina. So they didn't do that yet. So that would be compared to a mincha that a kmitza had not yet been taken from it. Nifras lachma, the bread, one of the breads broke. Halechem posel. The lechem aponim in the apostle, it's similar to a case in a mincha where some of it went missing before the kmitza. The full yisarin has to be in the keli in order to do a kmitza. If it's not, you can't do the kmitza. So who didn't hear if one of the breads broke before the removal of the bezicha levina, which is connected to kmitza, the whole lechem aponim is posel. The ein makter alav is a bezichin, and you will no longer put the bezichin of levina on the mizbeach because the mincha was chaser. However, misha parka nifras lachma. What if you've already removed the breads and the boziche levina from the shulchan? So now it's ke'ilu, the kmitza had already been done, yet the kmitza was not yet put onto the mizbeach. The haktara didn't occur, but the kmitza occurred. So we would call this bein kmitza laktara. Then halechem pasol. The lechem will be pasol. The kohanim will not eat it, but umaktir alav es a bezichin. But you will be able to be maktir the bezichin. So although the lechem is pasol, but you will be maktir the bezichin because the kmitza of Eis will be kosher. Frag the Gemara. The Amar Rabbi Lozer took this a step further, and he said, "Loi parka mamish." We don't have to wait till the beziche levina were actually removed, so there was an actual action of kmitza done already, and that's why you could be makter these beziche levina. But so Zok Gemara loy parka mamish elokivon shehegia zmana lefari. Even if the time has merely come, so there's a point in the day where the lechem aponim is supposed to be processed. When is that during the day? I believe Rashi says that's the 7th hour. So in the afternoon of Shabbos is when this happened. As Rashi says, Sha'avru sheishos, 6 hours have passed, and now we're in the 7th hour. When we're in the 7th hour, that is the point where they're supposed to start doing the dismantling of the lechem aponim, and we would call it like the changing of the guards and bringing in the lechem aponim. So Dr. Balazer, even if you didn't take the levina yet off, you didn't make the kmitza, but we're at the point where we're ready to make the kmitza. even if you didn't actually take the kmitza, it's kamisha per kadami. Now the question is, if you wanted to compare this to a real mincha, what would it be compared to? A real mincha before you took the kmitza. A real mincha before you took the kmitza, even though you're ready to take the kmitza, but a real mincha before you take the kmitza, for sure would be possible if it became chaser. Yet we're not applying that same rule to the mincha of the lechem apanim. V'amai, why not? The havaka mincha shechasra koidim kmitza. It's exactly like it is. It is. It's a mincha that was chaser before the kmitza. The bread broke before you took the levina away. Yet, although by a mincha the halacha is for sure that this mincha is possible, but a lechem apanim we're allowing the kmitza to be placed on the mizbeach. In other words, we're allowing the levina to be placed on the mizbeach. Zot gemor hola kasha. That's not a kasha on Rabbi Lazar. You know why? Because mincha, yes, avada he compares on one mincha to another. As we said earlier, Libalti compares one mincha to another. That's why mincha comes from behechal ksheira. That's true. But there's a very big difference, a practical difference, between the mincha of the lechem apanim versus a standard mincha. Because mincha leibar kaimates today. The mincha, when you have the fully saroin before the kmitza was done, you don't know which part is going to be the part of the kmitza until the kohen actually makes that kmitza. But v'ha by the lechem apanim bar koimet tida. Even before the kmitza is done, it's very clearly defined what the kmitza is. It's the beziche levina that are already separated and distinct from the rest of the mincha. So if that's the case, then you can argue bekivan shigiyas mana lefire command the parkadami. There's a practical difference between lechem apanim and a regular mincha. The lechem apanim, since the koimitz is already distinct and separated from the main mincha, so once the time comes to take it apart, we could look at it as if the kmitza was done already. But a regular mincha, until the kmitza is physically accomplished, we don't look at it like it was done, because the kmitza is still mixed in with the rest of the mincha. So that's why it's not a kasha. So Rabbi Lazar is midama davar ledavar when it comes to kachim, or mincha lemincha when it comes to kachim, except if there's a practical distinction between the two, then that wouldn't be a kasha. Dr. Gemara, Elamayata tava kishirayim shechasru ben kmitza l'Torah. So let's say you consider it like the kmitza was done, because the kmitza is distinct, but the shirayim became chaser, the breads broke before the haktara, but after the kmitza. Now, what's the halacha in that case by a mincha? It's the ein makdirin koimitz alein. You wouldn't be makdir the koimitz. Yet over here, Rabbi Lazar is saying, the Brisa says that you are makdir the levina. That's also not a kasha. It's a machlokes. We're going to learn on Daf Test. There's actually a machlokes in this case exactly. By a mincha that the kmitza was already done, and after the kmitza was done, some of the shirayim went missing. There is a machlokes if you would be makdir the kmitza. So Rabbi Lazar will sover law command the Omar shirayim shechasru ben kmitza l'Torah makdir koimet alein. Rabbi Lazar can hold like that man the Omar, that once the kmitza was taken, even if the mincha went missing, some of the shirayim went missing, although you won't eat the shirayim, nevertheless you will still put the kmitza on the mizbeach, and in the case of the lechem apanim, you will put the levina on the mizbeach. Period. Now the Gemara is going to analyze some Gemaras that we quoted earlier. Gufa, chavite kohen gadol, the chavitin of the kohen gadol. So it's a mincha that's really a full isarin, but half of the mincha is brought in the morning, and half of the mincha is brought in the afternoon, and this was a daily chiyuv for the kohen gadol. So Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Einoi kedusha chatzayin. The kohen has to bring the full isarin at once, put it into the klisharis, becomes a carbon mincha, and then you just makriv half of it in the morning and half of it in the afternoon. But Rabbi Lazar Amar, Vibalt, you're makriv it a half of isarin at a time, so the carbon is a half of isarin. So therefore, kedusha l'chatzayin, you could be makrish each independent chavitin, which consists of only a half isarin. You can be makrish even at a time. right? And if you remember, right, the Gemara asked, why did you learn that from Dam? So the Gemara said that Rabbi Elazar won't learn Mincha from Dam, but he will learn Mincha from Mincha. Zog the Gemara, Amr Rab Acha, my time with Rabbi Yochanan. What's this for Rabbi Yochanan, who holds Eina Kedusha Lachatzoyin? Zog the Gemara, because Amr Kra, Mincha Machtzisa. If you look at the pasuk says, "V'zeh karban iron uvanav asher krivel Hashem b'yomimashach isai asir sa'if asailas mincha tamid machtisa b'bayker machtisa ba'arav." So he reads the pasuk mincha machtisa, meaning heavy mincha. Bring the mincha complete, the fully sarn, the achekach chotzei, and only afterwards should you split it in half. So mincha, first the full mincha, umachtzisa, and then split it after you've already presented the full mincha. Okay, Gaval? Heavy mincha v'yachach chetzeyu, that is the sheet of Rabbi Yochanan. Meisvei, the Gemara asks a kasha on Rabbi Yochanan. Chavite kohen gadol, the chavitin of the kohen gadol, loy ho you boys chatzayin, you couldn't bring them a half at a time. Elo mevi isarin shalim, they brought a complete isarin, and then they would split it. Okay, so far, that sounds good. V'tanya we learned, ilu namar mincha machtis. Maybe just said mincha machtis. Hayisi omer. Then I would have said maybe chatzi isarin mibeisay shachris umakriv. The kohen gadol brings a half of isarin, which is the full requirement for the morning minchas chavitin. And then Chatzi Yisrael Mibesai Arvetz Umakru. And then in the afternoon he would bring a second half of Yisrael. Talmud Dover Machatzisa Baboiker Mechza Mishalem Humevi. He has to bring a complete Yisrael. So this is not a kasha on Rabbi Yochanan, I apologize. This is a kasha on Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar said, we've just quoted a brisa that says black and white that you have to bring a full isarin. So how could Rabbi Elazar say that you could even be makdish l'chatzayin? And for the Gemara, you know how Rabbi Elazar will learn this brisa we just quoted? L'mitzvah. It's not saying that it's ma'akiv and it won't become kodosh if you only bring a half isarin at a time. The pasuk is just telling you a mitzvah and a mucher is to bring it together. But with the eved, if you brought it separately, avada, it would work. Zokt Rashi, Umeshani, I'm looking at Rashi that the Dibra Amaskal was not in bold. But it's right opposite to where we are. Umeshani, Kimatzrich Kra, Lahavi Shalem, Le Mitzvah Ba'alma. It's just a mitzvah Ba'alma. Ula Oilam Kitchel Chatzoyin Nukudash, it would be Kaddish. So therefore, Rabbi Elazar can learn Mikra Din Avada, it will become Kaddish, even if you're only Makdish a half of the Mincha, but there's a mitzvah min mufkur to do it all together. Amalei Rabbi Gvia Mebeksil or Rabashi. Rabbi Gvia Mebeksil had a big kasha to Rabashi. How could you say that it's only the mitzvah? V'chugak sivba. Look at the pasuk. When the Torah talks about this Minchas Chavitin, the Torah uses the lashon chukah, and chukah always means, it says, Rashi quotes the pasuk, chak olam lashem. So whenever it says chukah, it means that it's ma'akiv. So that means when the Torah is telling us that you have to be present the holy Yisrael at one time, that's not just a mitzvah mukher, that's la'akiv. So it's tzirik shver and Rabbi Elazar. Amalei le'nitzcha el lavia shalem mibeisai. That just means that he has to bring the full Yisrael from his house at one time. But when you're mekadesh it, you're putting it into a klisharis. You don't have to put the full Yisrael into a klisharis at one time to be mekadesh the holy Yisrael. As long as you follow the Torah who says bring it in one container in the morning from home, but then as you need each half a Yisrael, place the half a Yisrael by itself into the klisharis, and it will be mekadesh. Gewaltig. Zakt Gemara, we Amar Rabbi Yochanan Hachi. Did Rabbi Yochanan actually say that you could only be mekadesh a holy Yisrael at a time? Yo Itmar, we had a machlokes. Hivrish Chatzi Saroin V'daite L'hoisev. This brisa is not talking about the Minchas Chavitin. This is talking about a regular person who is preparing a carbon. So he first was mafresh only a half a yisar. That's what he first did, only a half a yisar, which is clearly not enough for carbon mincha. But v'daite l'haisim, we know he's planning to bring more to get to the full yisar. As Rashi says, v'daite l'haisim l'hashlam yisar. That's what his plan was. That's what his plan was. So what would happen in such a case? Zog to Gemara. Rav Omar Einoi Kaddish. Rav said that wouldn't be Kaddish till he accumulates the fully Sorin, which is what a mincha consists of. Rabbi Yochanan Omar Kaddish. Rabbi Yochanan said even part would be Kaddish. V'misa, but if you learn one mincha from another, Leiluf Michavitin, why don't you learn it from Chavitin? And what did Rabbi Yochanan say by Chavitin? That you have to be makdish the whole thing together at once. So why is it that when you're bringing a mincha, even a half yisar would be kadosh by itself? And if you're going to say Rabbi Yochanan holds, you cannot learn a regular mincha from the minchas chavitin. That's not true. Rabbi Yochanan clearly demonstrates that he learns one item in kachim from another item in kachim. Why? Because what did Rabbi Yochanan say? Shlomim sheshachtan behechel. Where are you supposed to shech the shlamim? Anywhere in the Azara. What if you shechted it inside the heichel? That's not in the Azara. Ksherin is kosher. Why? The Chsivit says in the pasuk, "V'shachtoi Pesach oil moed." The pasuk says you're allowed to shecht it right in front of the oil moed. Shaloye tafel chamer meikar. If you could shecht it outside the oil moed, if that's enough kedusha, surely you should be able to shecht it inside the oil moed. So clearly, that is showing you learn one from the next. We learn the oil moed from the chotzer. Alma yalef heichel me'azor zokrash. The moment he made his comment that if you're allowed to shecht a shlomim in the azara, it's a good shchita. Surely you're allowed to do it in the heichel itself. That is what we consider milsa milsa. You're learning the heichel from the azara by culture. So once we see that Rabbi Yochanan subscribes to this principle of learning milsa milsa, then why is it that Rabbi Yochanan said that hifresh chatzi yisarin v'daita l'hoisef? Why did Rabbi Yochanan say kadosh if by the chavitin he says it's not kadosh? Zokt Gemara daita l'hoisef shiny. There's a very big difference. By the chavitin, if the kohen only put half a yisarin into the keli with the intent not to add more, that's where the halacha is, it's not kadosh. But here, he put in a half of yisarin because he's busy accumulating towards the full yisarin. That's a whole different story. And there, avada, it would be kadosh, and that's not a comparison to the chavit. Well, the Tanya we learned, milayim. It says in the pasuk. Let's read the pasuk. It says the karbona karis kesav achas by the Chanukas of Mishkan, Shloishim Umei Mishkala, Mizruk Echad Kesef, Shivim Shekel, B'Shekel HaKodesh, Shnei Mileim Soilas, B'Lula B'Shem B'Mich. These Kalim, the Karis Kesef Achas, and the Mizruk Echad were full of Soilas B'Lula B'Shem. And we learn, Ein Mileim Dr. Braisa, Ein Mileim Elo Shleimin. You know what Mileim means? It means Shleimin. Zok Rashi, Ein Mileim Shahoyu Mileim Mamish, HaMizrakim Soilas. Doesn't mean that they were full to the top. Elo Mileim Kol HaEsroinos Shekitzu B'Soichoi Shleimin Hoyu. Mileim means it had the full Yisarin. Mileim, Ein Mileim Elo Shleimim, it had the full Yisarin. It didn't necessarily mean that it was completely full. And this is the important point. When do you say that the half of Yisarin is not going to be accomplished by itself? That's Bizman Shein Daikin L'Hoisav. That if there's no intention to keep on adding flour to this keli until the full Isaron is reached, and you're trying to be Mekadesh only a part Isaron. But if you're in the process of filling it up, Rishon Kodesh. So you have a riot to this concept that the Gemara said that Daitoi Lahoisef Shine. The Baltic. Correct Gemara, V'Rav B'Chavitin Kama. Rav said earlier that if you're Mafresh Achatzi Isaron, it will not be Kodesh. Right? If Rish Chatzi Isaron V'Daitoi Lahoisef, Rav Omar Ein Kodesh. Why does Rav say being Mafresh a half of Isaron will not be Kodesh? V'Rav B'Chavitin Kama. What would he hold by the Chavitin? So of course, Rav's halacha is not by chavitin; it's by a regular mincha, and you're in the middle of filling it up. It's not kodesh. But what would Rav hold by chavitin? Come on, Tzvirli. Ikar Rabbi Lazar, if you learn like Rabbi Lazar, that half at a time would be kodesh, well then, leilif mechavitin. Why don't you learn a regular mincha from chavitin that even a half of Yisar you could be mekadesh? Why would Rav say it doesn't work? V'chitema Rav milsim and milsim le'alaf. Give you old Rav Shita. Also, we should all learn one thing from another when it comes to Kodoshim. So we won't learn a standard mincha from the minchas chavitin. That's not true, because the Amar Rav mincha kedosha beloy shemen beloy levayna. You could put only the flour of the mincha, so only the yisar of flour into the keli, and the keli will be mekadesh that flour towards the mincha, even though you have not yet mixed the oil into it, or you have not yet presented the levayna. Where do I see that? Shekei matzinu belechem aponim beloy levayna. We see that the lechem aponim becomes kadosh even without the levayna, and we also see shekei matzinu b'minchas nesachim beloy shemen. The gears is not so good over here. So let's look at Rashi over here. Mincha Kodoshim below shemen. Rashi says if you put a certain soilus, even though you didn't put the shemen in, it will still be kadosh. Shekem matinu belechem aponim, that it's a mincha and it doesn't have shemen. So that's a shekem matinu belechem aponim does not have shemen, but it has levayna. So you see, without shemen, it still becomes kadosh. And you see the minchas nesachim has shemen but doesn't have levayna. Levayna is only brought by the lechem aponim. So since you see there's a lechem aponim without shemen, and you have a minchas nesachim that doesn't have levayna, you see the shemen won't be ma'akiv and the levayna won't be ma'akiv. What if you have plain shemen that has neither shemen? What if you have plain flour? That has neither shemen nor levayna? How do you know that will be kadosh if you put it in the keli? Shekei matzinu b'minchas chayte. You find by a minchas chayte which doesn't need shemen and doesn't need levayna, yet it still becomes kadosh in the klisharis. So clearly, Rav is showing that he is medama milsa milsa, because he's saying by a regular mincha which needs shemen and levayna, you don't need the shemen and levayna there. The keli will be makdish, the flour by itself. Why? Because of a different minchas chayte that doesn't even need the shemen and levayna. That's clearly an example of being medama milsa milsa. So if Rav is medama milsa milsa, and Rav told us that if you're filling up the isarin of the mincha and you're only halfway there, it's not kadosh. If Rav says that it's not kadosh, what would he hold by chavit? If he held it by chavit and a half at a time would be kadosh, then it would be shver. Why is it when you're filling up a mincha, it's not kadosh? By the chavitin, you see even a half a yisarin will become kadosh. So Zok to Gemara, al karchach Rabbi Yochanan Svirlei. It must be that when it comes to the minchas chavitin, Rav must hold that a half a yisarin will not become kadosh, and therefore he can consistently say by a regular mincha, if you're in the middle of filling it up and you're only at half of yisarin, it will not be kadosh. Gewaltig. Gufa. Let's drill down into Rav's halacha. Gufa. Amar Rav. Mincha kadosha beloy shemen. A mincha can become kadosh even if you just put the flour into the sharish without any shemen. Shekei matinu belechem aponim beloy levayna. It could also become kadosh without levayna. Shekei matinu b'minchas nesachim where there's no levina, and beloy shemen beloy levina shekein matina b'minchas chayte. Fact the Gemara, what about the shemen ulevina? Even the shemen by itself, put into a keli sharis, or the levina by itself, put into kli sharis, kachi high beloy high, the high beloy high. The shemen by itself and the levina by itself. Why? Shekein matzinu beloy shemen shel mitzayra. You find that the loy shemen shel mitzayra becomes kadosh, a shemen by itself without anything else. And levina shekein matzinu belevina haba bevazichin. Again, the levina that comes in the bezichin by the lechem aponim is niskadesh by itself in a keli. So you see, even shemen by itself and levina by itself would get kedusha. Rabbi Chanina argues. Rabbi Chanina Amar. Rabbi Chanina says, Loizu kedusha b'loizu, v'loizu kedusha b'loizu. You need them all together in order for the mincha to be kadosh. Zokt Rashi b'chol menachos hatunu shemen levina ein kli sharis b'kadosh echad mehen elam kim shloshtam b'yachad b'kli. So Chanina holds that nothing becomes kadosh until all of the ingredients of the mincha are in that keli at that time. Fact Gemara, Reb Chanina isar in lamanimsha. So if that's the case, according to Reb Chanina, why did they ever make the measurement keli of an isarin? Why did they ever make it into a klisharis by shmearing it with shemen amishcha? When you're measuring flour by itself, it wouldn't become kaddish anyway. So just a measuring cup. Why did the measuring cup need to be made into a klisharis? The only reason why you would do that is so that it could be mekadesh the flour. But here it won't be mekadesh the flour because it's never mekadesh flour by itself, according to Reb Chanina. Zok the Gemara, leminchas chayte. You know why they had to make it into a klisharis? Because by the minchas chayte we learned, since it doesn't have shemen or levina, the flour itself will become kadosh. That's why they were mekadesh the measuring cup of an isarin to be mekadesh the flour for minchas chayte. V'loig lama nimshach. What about the measurement cup of a loig? Why do they make mashicha if oil by itself can't be kadosh? The teretz is the loig shel mitzayra, because even Rabbi Chanina agreed that the loig shel mitzayra was brought without any mixture, without any flour there. The Av Shmuel Sovel Lahad Rav. Shmuel also agrees to Rav that one component without the other, shemen by itself can become kadosh in the klisaris, levina can become by itself, flour can become by itself kadosh in the klisaris. Shmuel agrees to Rav that none. Kalei alach, we learned this mission in Zvachim. Kalei alach, if you have a keli that's made to hold wet things, liquids, mekachin es halach. It's a klisaris only to be mekadesh things that belong in it. Umidas hayavish, and measurements that measure dry goods, measurements that measure dry goods like a sarin or a chatzi sarin that measures flour, mekachinas hayavish. They will only be mekadesh flour. However, ve'enak lilach mekachinas hayavish v'lo midas hayavish mekachinas halach. A keli that's designed to measure out dry goods will not be mekadesh lach because there's no reason for lach to be in there, and vice versa. That was what the Mishnah said. The Yomar Shmuel, lo yishanu elamidos. This only applies to measuring keli, because there's never a reason for a measuring keli of an isarin to measure liquids, and vice versa. Aval mizrakos, but a general keli like a mizrak that's made to hold down, but it's not made to measure, that will mekachos esayavich. If you put dry flour into it, it will be mekadosh. How do we know? We know it from the Nisim. Shenemar shneim eleim soiles belulav hashemen lemincha. You had a mizrach. It was made for lach, yet it was able to be mekadosh the soiles for the mincha. So that is Shmuel's raya. That is Shmuel's raya that a mizrach would be a mizrach which is for lach would be mekadosh yavish. Amalei Reb Acha midifti l'Ravina. So Reb Acha midifti told Ravina, mincha lachai. What do you mean? The mincha has oil mixed into it. So this belulav hashemen. So if the mincha is lacha, How do you have a raya from here that a mizrach could be mekadesh a davar yavesh? The mincha is something that's considered lacha because it has oil in it. Amalei lenitzracha ela yavishim. You still have a raya because even when you pour oil into a mincha, not every little grain of flour is mixed with oil. There are some dry spots where oil didn't get to. How would the klishuris be mekadesh those parts of the flour? That could only be because a mizrach, which is made to hold blood, will also be mekadesh a davar yavesh. Vivoy sema, or you could say mincha legabe dam kiyavish davi. Dam is pure liquid. Mincha is a mixture. It's a doughy substance that would still be considered yavesh. So for the fact that the mincha became kadosh in the mizrach is a raya that a keli that's made to hold lach will be mekadesh even a davar yavesh. So here from Shmuel we see that he holds like Rav, and Rav holds that you could be mekadesh one at a time. You could be mekadesh the flour of the mincha even though there's no oil. Zog to Gemara vayter. Gufa. Amar Rabbi Lazar. Mincha shekamtza behechel. We learned earlier, we quoted from Rabbi Lazar that if you made kmitza on a mincha in the hechel, sheir will be kosher. Why? Shekein matinu b'siluk b'zicha. We found the parallel to the kmitza of a regular mincha is the removal of the beziche levoina of the lechem upon him, and that occurred in the hechel. So from there we learn mincha mi mincha, we learn that huadin, a regular mincha, the kmitza in the hechel will be fine. Most of Rabbi Yirmiyah had a kasha. It says the kamatz misham. We had this at the end of Zvachim. The kamatz misham. Actually, we had it at the beginning of Menachos already. The kamatz misham. The kohen takes the kmitza from there, and the pasuk was talking about the bailam bringing in his mincha. The kamatz misham. He takes the kmitza from where the bailam brought it. Mimokim sharakli azar agnes. So we learned that the Azar gets down in the first 11 amas of the Azara, and the Kohen could take the Kmitza from there, even in the Ezra Yisrael. Ben Beseir learned, and Ben Beseir is not relevant to our discussion, but we're just bringing down the end of the brisa. Ben Beseir Aimer Minayin Shin Kamet B'Smol Shiyachzor V'Yikbait V'Yamin. Where did Ben Beseir get it from? That if you do something wrong, you can have a do-over. Misham, which we darshan Mimokim Shekamitz Kvar. Where we made the last kmitza of Misham, you can make it again. But we're focused on the first part. Rabbi Yirmiyah said you make the kmitza b'makom sheragli azar ayman. So the question is, if you're going to tell me that Rabbi Lazar learns mincha comes to behechel is kshera. Why? Because you find it by siluk bezichin. But that's not what he says here. Here he says it has to be bedafka in the Zara, b'makim sharakle azar aimbos, and that wouldn't be in the hechel. So Zoktamar ikadamri hu moishav lav hu mafarfa. There are those who learn that Rabbi Yirmiyah Gufa answered his own kasha. Ikadamri amli Rabbi Yaakov Rabbi Yirmiyah batachlifa asberla. It's Rabbi Yaakov who said the teretz, and here's the teretz: Leiditzricha elo lahachshir eskol haazara kula. We don't learn from the pasuk of Mekamitz Misham that the Kemitza has to be dafke in the Azara, cannot be in the Heichel. Avada could be in the Heichel. So what do you learn from there? You learn from there that anywhere in the Azara, you're able to do the Kemitza, not only on the Tzafan half. Why would I think that you could only do the Kemitza on the Tzafan half? Shalai Timer, Hoyel Va'ila Kache Kachem. Uminche Kache Kachem. Vibal, they're both carbonas of Kache Kachem. Ma'ila Tuna Tzafin, Af Mincha Tuna Tzafin. Just like I know last time we shaked with Tzafin. Therefore, I have a pasuk to tell you Misham lav dafka in the tzafin. Frankly, I wouldn't learn from Oila that a mincha needs kmitza b'tzafin, because I would argue mala Oila shekain kalil. The Oila is fully burnt on the mizbeach, unlike a mincha. So just because the Oila needs tzafin, who said a mincha would need tzafin? Okay, so mechatas. The chatas is eaten by the kohanim, and it needs to be shakli b'tzafin. Huadin, we would think that the mincha needs to be nikmat b'tzafin, so I need a pasuk for that. No, malachata shekein mechaperes al chayv krisis. Chatas is a big chomer. It's machayv al chayv krisis. Maybe that's why it needs to be shakli b'tzafin. So Zokkamar, we can learn from Asham. For Kamar Mala Asham shekein mine dam. Osham is mini domim. Domim are the best kapara. Domim is a very powerful kapara, as Rashi tells us. And maybe the Baltan has domim, that's why it needs to be shechted b'tzofein. Why would I think that a mincha has to be shechted b'tzofein? Zok to Gemara, Bikulunami. Why don't you say we can make a tzara shava from chatas oila and osham? Zok to Gemara, no, because the tzara shava shabbat is shekain mini damim. They're all mini damim, and as Rashi says, chamura kaparason the ikar kapara bedam. So therefore, who said by a mincha, which is not mindam, who said that would need tzafah? Elitrich. You know why we need a pasuk to tell us that even in the Azara, you could do the kmitza is for a different reason. Nothing to do with tzafah, but rather, we know there's a rule by the mincha, before you make the kmitza, you have to bring the whole mincha together to the southwestern corner of the mizbeach. And then the kamatz. So I would have thought, Mahagasha Bekaren Dorimus Marovis, just like the whole mincha needs to be brought to the Karen Dorimus Marovis, maybe that's where the Kamitza must occur. Af Kamitza Nami Bekaren Dorimus Marovis, Kamach Malam, that no, once you bring the whole mincha to the Karen Dorimus Marovis, now you could go anywhere you want to do the actual Kamitza. Gufa, Amr Bechanan, Shalom Mishachim Bechol Ksherin. Rabbi Yochanan said that if you shech on a shalom in the heichal, it's kosher. Shenamar v'shachto pesach hayel mayid, and he learned v'lo tafel chamer min ikar, and from there we learned that Rabbi Yochanan learns dover midover by kachim, because we learned that the heichal is kosher v'shchita just like the azara. Makes effect the Gemara. Rabbi Yudah ben Beseir Aimer minayin shemekifay adik achavim es azara. How do you know that if it's dangerous for the kayanim to catch him in the azara? They make it shot by arrows because the goyim surrounded them. How do you know they're allowed to eat the karbanis chatas and the menachos inside the heichal where they have shelter? Talmud loymar state and pasuk turning on to daf Tesam and Aleph. They could even eat in the Kodesh Kodoshim. Fact the Gemara, according to Rabbi Yochanan's, Shita, where you could say Shlo Tavel Chamam in the Iker, why don't you need a pasuk that tells me they're allowed to eat the kachim inside the Heichel? I know it's Shlo Tavel Chamam in the Iker. V'alamali gra lema b'chachar yamoid yachlua v'lo Tavel Chamam in the Iker. That's not a kasha. Avoida, when talking about doing the avoida, like the kmitza, like the shchita, the adam ovid b'makom rabbi, where it's appropriate for a servant to do service, even in the inner chambers of his adai. There you'll say Armenian shalo yehei tafel chamer niker. But achila, that's by eating them by lunchtime. She'ein adam oichel b'makom rabbi. Never will the servant eat with the king. He'll eat in his private dining room. He'll eat in the servant's dining room. There, you wouldn't just say that he can eat there. And therefore, we need a special pasuk. Time in the cost of crop, the pasuk says, that's why they're allowed to eat it in the heichal. Haloi cost of crop, lo yeh tafel chamam in the ikar lo yamrinon. You wouldn't just say from logic that the kohen can eat the chelik that he gets even in the heichal. Okay, Baruch Hashem, we're going to finish Daf Ches, and Bez Hashem tomorrow we will learn Daf Tes. I want to wish everybody a good gebench to Chodesh, a gebench to Yor, and we should have a Zisa, Hatzlachadik, a Mazel month.